Jim, as a D-Day veteran, a Second World War veteran, can you tell us a little bit about how and why you joined the war effort?
Looking back, I was keen to be involved with the war. I've been bombed. I've been bombed. I've been evacuated. I've been bombed. I'd lost my brother had been killed. Lots of relatives and friends. The street I lived in, they lost nearly every house had children that went. Some of whom went to sea. Practically every family I could think of that I knew had lost somebody during the war. So I did want to play a part in the war, but it wouldn't. Even if there hadn't been a war, I would have gone to sea anyway, because that's what we did in my family. We all went to sea. Everybody went to sea. As soon as you left school, straight away, galley boy, deck boy, merchant ships or trawlers.
Yeah.
Everybody in my part of Hull went to sea. We're all on my mother's side, the whole family were fishermen and connected with the fishing industry. But me and my two brothers, we each went deep sea first.
Yeah, and so you went on to serve in Normandy, D-Day.
Yeah, I should have been allowed. The reason I got to be the youngest D-Day veteran was because, although my two brothers both went to sea before the war, left school at 14 in the 30s, so they went to sea at 14. And I didn't leave school till 15, at 44, and I thought I was going to go straight to sea. I did go straight to sea, but when I went down to the shipping office to get a ship, they turned me away initially. They said because during the war, they brought in a rule that you couldn't go deep sea until you were 16. You couldn't go in the forces until you were 16, and you couldn't go in the merchant service at deep sea until you were 16. So I was a bit annoyed about that, but fortunately for me, and for the war effort, the tugs went on the system. All the merchant ships, shipping companies were on what they call a pool system. So you didn't go to the individual office, you went to the shipping federation. But the tugs, the deep sea rescue tugs that I was on, they weren't involved with this system. So they were right next door to the shipping office. So when the shipping office turned me away, said, come back when you're 16, I just popped in next door and they gave me a job straight away. You know, I sort of, got any jobs going? They said, yeah, we need a deckhand on this tug. They didn't care how old I was, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how I got to see. That's how I got to be at Paramount on D-Day.
I think you're fairly famous for being involved in D-Day. What happened after D-Day and from D-Day till the end of the war, at least till the end of the European War?
Well, all that year, all 44 until early 45, I was running back and forwards from France to England. So I was either doing rescue duty, building the Mulberry first of all. That took months. Incidentally, I'd just been watching a program, one of these the war programs. I've seen it before, and it's about the preparation for D-Day, and they repeat, as they often do, the mistakes that get carried on. So according to the official record, you know, he says, and then the Mulberry Harbour, which they accept was the most important part of the operation, essential part of the operation. So the Mulberry Harbour, we started building the Mulberry Harbour on D+1. That's not true. That's what the record says. When I was there on D-Day itself, in the afternoon of D-Day, that's when we started. As soon as we arrived, about 4 or 5 o'clock D-Day, we were scuttling block ships in position to build the Mulberry Harbour on the fire. Yeah. So the harbour was started on D-Day, not D1. Just in years to come, if anybody talks to them, you tell them that. Say, I know this because I know somebody was there.
Yeah, and I sure will. So obviously, then you were going backwards and forwards. I guess in France, right? Was it or
running components over to the Mulberry and bringing ships back that had been. There was still a lot of activity going on in the Channel. There was still E-boats and U-boats operating in the Channel. A lot of E-boats coming out of the North German port from Brest. So a lot of the time we go to rescue ships and either take them back to France or bring them back to, more often bring them back to UK. Quite often we're bringing ships back to UK. So we did a lot of rescue work and running back and forth. It wasn't, so all that year from D-Day, I never got home again. I sailed out of Hull in April in 44. I didn't get back to Hull till January or February 45. So not long before VE Day.
Yeah.
I was back in Hull working by on a ship, I think, in Albert Dock when on VE Day.
Wow. So that's great. It brings me on to the next question. So on VE Day itself, where were you when you heard the news that the war was over?
I can't remember exactly where I was. I think I must have been, I think I'm probably at home and heard it on the news and it was immediately out in the street. So my memory of that day is of non-stop dancing. I'm not a great one for dancing, but during the war, American swing and jazz music was very popular, and all the American films showed people jitterbugging, jiving, you know, the dance.
Yeah.
Now, so young people were all interested. So I mastered this. I couldn't do any other dances, but I could jitterbug. I could do this fast dance and swing people around. And so, lots of people couldn't do it. So on VE Day, my recollection is non-stop, all night long, dancing in the streets. And there were lots and lots of girls in uniform, ATS girls and WAFs and Wrens around, and they all wanted to jitterbug. So I was in great demand because I could do this dance, you see. I was really proficient. So I just non-stop dancing. I've never been so much in demand before, all night long. I had a lot of drink, of course, and a lot of singing. It was a great night. It was in Hull, in the centre of Hull, the town square. There is right next to it. There's a place called Queen's Gardens. It used to be a dock, Queen's Dock, and then in the 30s it was filled in and became a sort of centre city, a bit like Central Park in New York, not as big as that, a little green space right in the centre of the city, and that everybody flocked onto that, and that was packed all night long. So that's what it was.
I'm jealous of that bit, I've got to say. Sounds great.
Lots of rum, Floyd, lots of spirits. Normally, I drank a lot of spirits that night. I didn't normally drink spirits in those days, but yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So then, obviously, the war came to an end 75 years ago.
Yeah.
What led you on to being such a great peace activist?
I think up until 45, I wasn't pro-war, but I was very keen to defeat the Nazis. I was a young communist. Months before I took part in the Second Front, when I was still a schoolboy in Hull, I was going around Hull painting slogans on the wall, "Second Front now," for the Young Communist League. You know, I was part of that campaign for a Second Front. So I was very, I was pro-fighting the Nazis. And what started me thinking about war and the nature of war was the atomic bomb. So, like everybody else, when the bomb first dropped, and said, "Oh, we got," we're all worried about the war in the Far East, expecting it to be another long, deadly struggle. When we heard that they dropped this bomb that wiped out thousands of people, the first reaction was, "Oh, good, that'll shorten the war. That the war will be over sooner. They won't be able to cope with it." And some truth in that was a reasonable reaction. But as I read and heard more about it, and the effect of it, and the fact that the whole city was wiped out, and women, children, babes in arms, pregnant women, anybody, hospitals just gone, with the full horror of it, I began to discover that. I came round to the view that that was an unacceptable, to me, unacceptable way of winning a war. That even though it would have cost more men fighting, you had to have restraint in war in the same way as if you were fighting hand to hand, you wouldn't pause to bayonet children.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't. So even in a battle for survival, which Second World War was a battle for survival, would have been a terrible result if we lost. So even though there would have been terrible things done in a conventional war, there's still a point. There's still things you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I suppose before that, I had the similar thought about flamethrowers. You know, when you see these films, which they showed in the war, mostly of Americans in the Pacific, not so much our troops, although we probably had them as well, but it showed it of flamethrower. And that to me was an atrocity. So I regarded certain actions as atrocity. I became to see that the atom bomb was an atrocity and shouldn't be tolerated. So I was opposed to that. And after the wars, you know, in 46, I went into the Royal Navy. I spent 7 years in the Royal Navy, cruising around the world, doing all kinds of interesting things. But I educated myself in that time. I read a lot and studied, and that it was during that period I became generally anti-war. You know, I realised the futility of it and how it could be avoided. And I tell the story that I was a radar operator, and I was so impressed by I became aware of all the thought and effort and talent and skill and money that went into perfecting ways of killing people. Long range radar and gunnery and you know so modern warships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, battle rifles, they were weapons of mass destruction. And there's so much skill and effort and talent went into building them. And I began to argue with my messmates about this and say, you know, we ought to put this thought and effort to avoiding the need for weapons of mass destruction, for killing people at long range. It would work. So that's how I became to be anti-war. And so when I came out of the Navy, I did start campaigning. I started campaigning even while I was in the Navy, in a small way, because there's not much you can do in the service, against nuclear weapons. I argued fiercely against nuclear weapons and encouraged people to not to vote for anybody who would support nuclear weapons. So I supported the Labour Party at that time. When I came out, I formed a humanist group. I became anti-religious too, and I formed a humanist group, but it was an anti-war humanist group. And around about that time, after I came out of the Navy, that was in the early 50s, in 54, 53, 54. Around about that time, the news broke. Some newspaper revealed that American airplanes flying over Britain routinely were carrying live nuclear weapons. And they had been doing so ever since the war, ever since 45. And nobody had been told. It wasn't general knowledge. Some newspaper got the story and we didn't know it had been going on. So quite a lot of people, including me, immediately started organising, campaigning, taking to the streets about this. And that's how I got in touch with Mike Randall and the Direct Action Committee and Pat Harrismith. People like that were already involved in opposing the American bases. And we started organising. They were still actually building more American bases in the 50s for all these American planes that were based here. And there's an early warning system to give America 15 minutes warning. We've got to have 4 minutes warning, I think. And so we started going on these bases and try to stop them being built and campaign against nuclear weapons in general. And we made contact with people in America and in Japan. And out of that came the desire for a national organization, as apart from a small pressure group. Direct Action Committee was a relatively small group of people, all keen, devoted activists, and already every one of us prepared to go to jail if necessary, as most of us did. But we saw the need for a national organization. So we organized the first Aldermaston March, which was going to be a march from Aldermaston, where to build, store our nuclear weapons, to London, the other side of Reading to London. A peaceful, non-violent demonstration, and got tremendous support, massive support. And of course, the Tory government at the time thought we were all evil spies and communists. We were all Reds under the beds. We're all regarded as very sinister and dangerous for peacefully walking from A to B with placards. And they photographed us and raided us and spied on us and labelled us in the press. But we continued. And the same year, we formed CND. We also formed the Committee of 100, which was the people in the Direct Action Committee wanted something a bit more aggressive than CND. And so the Committee 100's plan was to promote civil disobedience. We had this idea that if we could get enough people to defy the law, they couldn't put us all in jail, or if the jails were full to overflowing, they'd have to back down. Well, we never quite got that far. But a lot of us did do jail time, of course, and I found myself behind bars a few times, but that was Committee 100. So I cut my teeth there. Been with it ever since. I've stopped.
Yeah, and you're a founding member of VFP UK as well.
Yep, and ex-service CND when that came along.
Yeah.
And of course, I used to run a thing called the Vietnam Action Group in the Vietnam Solidarity Campaign, which I was involved with Tariq Ali. But the Vietnam Action Group was a relatively small group of people which I convened, and they took direct action. We were stunts, all kinds of stunts. They got massive publicity. So I did all kinds of things. I was in the news a lot in the years.
You've never stopped being in the news, Jim.
I wasn't seeking publicity for me. I was seeking publicity for the cause, for the issue.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The Sunday Times want to refer to me as the ubiquitous Jim Radford because my name kept popping up. Whereas the right-wing paper was called as Rentamom, of course. Which implied that we were getting paid, but of course we weren't getting paid. We were losing money, of course.
What message would you give, what would you like to give the world on the 75th anniversary of VE Day? If you can just give one message.
Yeah, a very simple message. Don't join up, don't join. There's a song. If there's a war, don't go. So my message, occasionally I get invited into schools.
Yeah.
And I go into schools. I used to go into schools for the Normandy vets, and I used to go into schools for ex-service C&D, and I now go into school with Veterans for Peace. But mostly they want me to tell them stories about the war and what it was like, and they're interested in so I do that. I tell them about it. But I always finish up by explaining to them, that war is a very messy thing, and it's not glamorous, and it's once you've seen people blown to pieces, once you know what war tastes like and smells like, and it's not heroic, and there's a lot of piss and blood and shit when people get blown up, and it's not nice, and it should be avoided if humanly possible. So I say to the kids, I say, listen, if your country ever gets attacked, anybody comes round to your house and attacks your mum and dad, get an axe and defend them. If your country's attacked, join up, go on the beaches and defend your country. But don't go and let them train you and put you in the uniform and ship you thousands of miles away to kill people who don't know the way to Britain. You know, they don't know where they weren't planning to come and kill you. So don't you go and kill them. These problems can be solved with all kinds of ways, but walking away from trouble is a sensible thing to do. Unless if people bring trouble to you, defend yourself and defend your interest. But don't go looking for trouble and don't start fights. And that's the advice you give to your children. To my kids, I say, right, yeah, defend yourself if you're attacked. Don't start trouble. Walk away from it. Same advice holds true for countries, nations, and countries that take that advice. So, well, our neutral country campaign, very sensible.
Yeah.
If we didn't learn that lesson, we want to be in every fight. America, even worse. They followed our example and they passed us. They're even better at starting fights than we were. And it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Nobody likes a bully. Nobody likes somebody who starts fights. So let's try and be popular. Let's make people like us.
Wouldn't that be nice, eh?
It would be nice, yeah.
Jim, would you like to finish with a song?
What, any particular song you'd like?
Any song of your choosing, Jim?
There's a guy called Stan Rogers, Canadian songwriter, brilliant songwriter. Died in a plane crash, trying to save other people's lives. And he was a great songwriter of Canada. Like Eric Bogan is a great songwriter in Australia. And Stan wrote a song called The Lock Keeper. And I sing it sometimes because people say to me sometimes, why did you stop going to sea, Jim? You always wanted to go to sea. You had no, until I was in my 20s, I never had any thought about doing anything else. I mean, I've had an interesting life for sure. I've done a lot of interesting things. I've held down one or two quite important jobs. But if I would have spent all my life at sea except for one thing.
Which was?
My last year in the Navy, 54, when I was due to the mob, and my plan was to come out, go back to Hull and go deep sea again, merchant Navy, perhaps go trawling, do some study, perhaps get a ticket. Up until that time, I hadn't been studying. I'd been studying other things. I thought, well, get a ticket. I could be, a mate or a skipper. That was my plan.
Yeah.
It all changed in 1952. And I met this incredibly beautiful Wren, my last year in the Navy. And upper class girl, totally out of my class, had no hope in hell. All the officers, and I was only a leading hand. All the officers and chief petty officer chasing this beautiful red-haired Wren. I was at Naval Radar Training Base in Wales, so that's my last space. But I threw my hat in the ring and won this girl, and there was no way I was going to go to sea and leave her behind. So I followed the anchor. And that's what happens with lots of young men who go to sea and like the life, but then comes the point you've got to choose. Are you going to go your love of the sea or your love of this woman? You can't have both.
Right.
Or if you love the sea more than one, you've got to leave her behind, and I wouldn't do that. So Stan wrote this song called The Lock Keeper. It's a song on, I don't know if you know, in Canada, there's a little St. Lawrence Seaway. Great.
I'm going to say, of course I know it, Jim.
Yeah, links up the Great Lakes with the sea. So this is the lock keeper on the St. Lawrence Seaway, talking to the skipper of an ocean-going ship, and he goes like this. He explains why people stop going to sea. He goes, you say, well met again, lock keeper. We're laden even deeper this time than before. Oriental oil and tea brought down from Singapore. And as we wait for my luck to cycle, I say my wife has just given me a son. A son, you cry, is that all that you've done? Then come with me, you say, to where the Southern Cross right high above your shoulder. And come with me, you say, each day you tend this luck, you're one day older, while your blood runs colder. Anchor chains a fetter, and with it you are tethered to the foam. And I wouldn't trade your life for 1 hour of home. She wears bougainvillea blossom. You pluck them from her hair and toss them in the tide. Sweep her in your arms and carry her inside. Her tears brush on your shoulder. Her moonlit eyes grow bold and wiser through the tears. And I say, how could you stand to leave her for a year? Ah, but come with me, you say, to wear the Southern Cross right high above your shoulder. And come with me, you say, each day you tend this lock, you're one day older, while your blood runs colder. That anchor chains a fetter, and with it you are tethered to the foam. And I wouldn't trade your life for 1 hour of home. But I'm stuck here on this seaway, while you compensate for leeway through the drains. And you shoot the stars to see the miles you've made, and you laugh at the hearts you've ridden. But which of these has given us more love of life? You, your tropic maids, or me, my wife? Ah, but come with me, you say, to wear the Southern Cross right high above your shoulder. And come with me, you say, each day you tend this lock, you're one day older, while your blood runs colder. But that anchor chains a fetter, and with it you are tethered to the foam. And I wouldn't trade your life for 1 hour of home. Sure, that anchor chains a fetter, and with it you are tethered to the foam. And I wouldn't trade your whole life for 1 hour of home. There you go, Stan Rogers.
Jim, thank you very much. Yeah,
My pleasure.
you take care.